combined manifestation of Radha and Krishna, the embodiment of spiritual ecstasy. The name Vishwambara was bestowed upon the child by Nilambar Chakravarti. Being an astrologer, he was able to detect that the boy would indeed be the maintainer of the universe, that he would be wiser than Brihaspati, that he was Narayana, and that he would establish faith in God all over the world. Apparently, the child's horoscope also indicated that he would eventually take sannyasa, the renounced order of life. But Neelambara chose not to give this information to Vishwambara's parents. Baby Vishwambara showed great delight when he heard local people chanting the name Hari. For this reason, the neighborhood ladies called him Gaura Hari, acknowledging his golden complexion and his attachment to the name of the god. One of these ladies, Sita Thakurani, the wife of Advaita Acharya, remembering Mother Sachi's pain in losing 8 daughters prior to this blessed event, prayed that nothing unfortunate befall little Vishwambara, and for this reason she blessed the boy by naming him Nimai. In Navadvip, it was said that the bitter leaves of a neem tree, Aichiata indica, would ward off evil spirits and negativity. In addition, little Nimai was born under a neem tree. As a child, Nimai was highly spirited and mischievous, embodying lovable rascaldom in the mood of baby Krishna. On one occasion, he played on the hood of a large snake, causing fears in the heart of his well-wishers. But the serpent crawled away without incident. Sometimes, as baby Nimai would crawl about, his hands and feet would leave on the ground an imprint of the marks of Vishnu, such as the flag, thunderbolt, and so on. At first, his parents attributed the divine markings to Damodar Gopala, the tutelary family deity. But after some time, they become convinced that the marks must belong to their special little Nimai. Once, 2 thieves, admiring the golden and jeweled ornaments that adorned Nimai's body, picked him up and carried him away. But the young Avatara used his mystic potency to bewilder the kidnappers, and so, instead of taking young Nimai to their hideout, they mistakenly returned him to his own home. Sometimes, Nimai would sneak up to his friends and tickle them with twigs and then run away. He often took joy in creating obstacles in the games of other children, and on several occasions he broke his mother's cooking pots and stole toys from his friends. Once he even made off with a part of meal prepared for a Brahmana guest of his father's. In a separate incident, he had his father taken 2 miles away from their home to the house of Hiranya and Jagadisha, who were preparing delectable foodstuffs as an offering for Krishna. Nimai ate their offerings himself, inadvertently suggesting his identity with Krishna, for whom the food was meant. When Nimai was particularly vexatious, Mother Sachi used to bind him with ropes as Yashoda did to Krishna. On one occasion, the enraged child ran away to sulk in a private place, a rubbish heap. Sachi followed her son, and when she saw the filthy place in which he took shelter, she begged him to come away and pretend as though nothing had happened. Sachi was a proper Brahmani, viewing ritual purity as a foremost consideration. But Nimai explained to her that the states of purity and impurity were both ultimately products of illusion, as were all other aspects of existence, with the sole exception of the Supreme Lord. Sachi would not hear it, and she forcibly took her divine son to the Swarna river to bathe him from head to toe. On a similar occasion, Nimai threw some refuse at his mother's, and she fainted. He became frightened for his mother's life, and in deep affection ran to her, caressing her face and muttering, "Mother, mother," with remorse. Neighborhood women, observing the incident, decided to have fun with him. They told him that he must immediately bring a couple of coconuts, for only those could save Mother Sachi from certain death. He quickly ran out and came back with 2 green coconuts. The women began to laugh joyously, appreciating the child's deep love for Sachi Devi. Once, when Mother Sachi gave Nimai several sweets to eat, he ate clay instead. Mother Sachi began to severely chastise him, but he quickly turned the situation into an opportunity to philosophize with her. Ultimately, he said, there is no difference between clay and sweets. One is merely a transformation of the other. In this way, all matter is related. Sachi felt that this idea was impractical and it reflected the worst form of Mayavada philosophy. She then defeated her brilliant son, and also in doing, she defeated the premise of Mayavada perspective. She said, while sweets and clay do share many qualities in common and are in the sense one, the two forms of matter are quite different as well, quite distinct as well. Sweets have some nutritional value, while clay, when indigested, will undermine one's health. After this incident, Nimai vowed never to eat clay again. In 1494, when Nimai was about 8 years old, he started formal schooling under Gangadas Pandita. Merely 2 years later, he was hailed as great Pandita himself, having mastered several languages, logic, rhetoric, hermeneutics, and philosophy. It was at this time too that his brother Vishwarupa took sannyasa, leaving home never to be seen again. Some say that Vishwarupa left his body soon after he took sannyasa, manifesting himself as Nityananda Prabhu. Others emphasize that Sri Chaitanya's sacred thread was a manifestation of Vishwarupa, since Balarama Tattva includes a manifestation as the Lord's paraphernalia. In the year 1500, when Nimai was 14 years of age, he took the beautiful Lakshmi Priya as his wife. The young couple were quite happy, and Nimai began to earn his own living by opening a school, teaching grammar, and publishing a textbook on Nyaya, which unfortunately is no longer extant. Soon after his marriage, Nimai decided to go to his ancestral village in East Bengal to earn money and to visit his relatives. While he travelled from town to town, his wife did not fare well in his absence. It is said that she was bitten by the snake of separation and that she left this world at a tender age while he was away. Sachi encouraged Nimai to remarry. She chose for him the chaste and lovely Vishnu Priya, who eventually became one of the great female devotees in the history of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. Nimai and Vishnu Priya were quickly married upon Nimai's return to Navadvipa. Nimai managed to win a following while in East Bengal and had even secretly revealed his mission to Tapan Mishra, the wise Brahmana who came to him with basic existential questions. Nimai told him that the beginning and the end of knowledge consists of glorifying the Lord and that this is best done by congregational chanting of the holy name. He also told Tapan Mishra about the importance of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Later, this same year, 1502, Nimai's father passed away, and almost 1 year after that, he went to Gaya, performed the Shraddha ceremony for his father's departed soul. Before taking up his historic journey to Gaya, however, he met Keshava Kashmiri, a traveling Pandita who was proud of his ability to defeat all opposing parties in intellectual debate. Nimai asked the Pandita to extemporaneously compose and recite elaborate Sanskrit poetry in glorification of the holy Ganges river. Keshava Kashmiri gladly complied, but when he completed his presentation, Nimai politely pointed out several rhetorical errors in his composition. Keshava tried to defend his work, but he was ultimately defeated. Out of compassion, Nimai forbade his students from laughing at the proud Pandita's humorous attempt to save his reputation. As Nimai made his way to Gaya, he was determined to perform the prescribed Vedic rituals for his departed father. But he was just as interested in meeting Ishwarapuri, a sadhu whom he had met several years earlier in Navadvip. This holy man had asked Nimai to review and edit his book, Krishna Leelamrita. But Nimai felt that when a work is composed by someone as pure as Ishwarapuri, it is offensive to presume that it could be improved upon. Clearly, then Ishwarapuri had left his impression on Nimai, and so while Nimai was in Gaya, he decided to search out and take Vaishnava initiation from him. This initiation marked a vital transformation in the life of Nimai Pandita. Prior to this, Nimai had made a name for himself as a scholar, but devotion was not seen in him, at least not overtly. Srivas Thakura and other Vaishnavas in Navadvip had tried to influence him, showing him the limits of scholarship and the glory of bhakti. but he would normally make fun of them, although he would, in a loving way, assure them that the path of devotion is indeed the only true path. But for one, he at least was not yet ready. After his trip to Gaya, however, he was like a new person, and much to the delight of Vaishnava community, he became a live wire of Krishna consciousness, electrifying everyone he met with his enthusiastic sense of love of Godhead. The Pandita gave way to the prema. Dialects moved aside and devotion reigned supreme. All of Navadvip came to life under Nimai's banner of Vaishnava love. Shiva Thakur's home became particularly famous as a spiritual meeting place where devotees would come together and perform nocturnal kirtana. Many of Nimai's most confidential associates would gather there regularly and worship him on a special seat known as the throne of Vishnu. On one occasion, these devotees were even given the blessing of seeing Nimai's full divinity. This was called as Mahabhava Prakasha, wherein Nimai revealed his identity with the various incarnations of Godhead according to his devotees' relationship with him. Devotees of Navadvipa began to exhibit ecstatic symptoms as a common occurrence, and the mystical experiences they would have in Srivas Thakur's home became the stuff of local legends. All and sundry desired to personally witness the mystical displays of devotion that occurred behind the closed doors of Shiva's courtyard. Fabulous stories of miracles and spiritual phenomena spread as rapidly as the holy name of Krishna. Nimai sent his main followers into the streets to share his message of love with the masses. By doing so, he converted even drunkards and villains such as the evil brothers Jagai and Madai to the path of Vaishnavism. On one occasion, when Nimai's followers were harassed by Chandkasi, an important Muslim magistrate, the Vaishnavas retaliated by starting a non-violent civil disobedience march, with literally thousands of torches and lamps lighting the dark streets of Navadvip. The devotees led by Nimai enacted an elaborate nocturnal Nagar Sankirtan festival that ended at the house of Chandkasi. Once there, Nimai conversed with his host in an enduring way, quoting from Quran and Vedic literature, and in this way he explained the authenticity of his Sankirtana movement. In due course, Chandkaji became a believer and passed a law forbidding his constituents from obstructing the Sankirtana mission. Nimai engaged in many more pastimes with his loving followers in Navadvip, but was soon ready to take sannyasa, the renounced order of life. Some say that his initiation into Vaishnavism occurred in 1502, as mentioned earlier, and his sannyasa in 1510, which suggests that his Navadvip Leela as a Vaishnava occurred over a period of 8 years. Others say that he took Vaishnava initiation in 1509, just 1 year before he became sannyasi. Whatever the case may be, all authorities accept that his sannyasa occurred in 1510 when he was 24 years old. When Nimai decided to take sannyasa, he called Nitai, his most cherished associate, to his side and instructed Nitai to tell only 5 people about his decision: Sachimata, Gadadhar Pandit, Brahmananda, Chandrasekhara, and Mukunda. His other followers did not know. Nonetheless, the evening before his sannyasa, he called them all together at his home to associate with them at least one time before adopting the life of a wandering renunciate. After they retired for the evening, only Sachi remained. She sat at the doorway of their home and cried throughout the night. In the morning, Nimai consoled her with sweet words and made his way to Katwa, where he took sannyasa initiation from Keshav Bharati. Some say that Nimai also explained his reason for taking sannyasa to his wife. As Nimai's beautiful raven black hair was cut by the barber who was known as Madhu, the devotees looked in disbelief. Their beloved Nimai would now live the austere life of a sannyasi, traveling and spreading the glories of Krishna throughout the land. Devotees did not want to think of the Lord as sannyasi. Rather, they wanted to pamper him and to fulfill his every desire. But he was determined to renounce the world to set an example of a perfect sannyasi. Moreover, his mission was to spread the love for Krishna, and the intellectuals and religious leaders of the day would more likely to hear his message if he was a member of a highly respected, renounced order. As Keshav Bharati completed the ceremony, he gave Nimai the religious name Sri Krishna Chaitanya. After traveling about as a new sannyasi for some time, Sri Chaitanya came back to Bengal, and there he saw his Navadvip devotees once again. At this time, he assured Mother Sachi that he would make Jagannath Puri as his headquarters. This was important to her because Puri is close to Navadvip than Navadvip is to Vrindavan, where he originally wanted to settle. So she would more easily hear news about his activities. When Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu first arrived at Puri, he met Vasudeva Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, a powerful scholar whose fame was known throughout the Indian subcontinent. The Bhattacharya had found the dialectical school of Navya Nyaya at Navadvipa, to which scholars were drawn from all over India and which had eclipsed the Mithila school, the most important center of learning in northern India at that time. The Bhattacharya was driven from Navadvip by the persecution of Hussain Shah and then the Islamic ruler of Bengal. He was living in Puri under the patronage of King Pratap Rudra, the king of Orissa, who held him in high esteem. The Bhattacharya was about 8 years old when Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, 80 years old when Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu arrived in Puri. When Sri Chaitanya first entered the temple of Jagannatha, he was immediately filled with ecstasy upon seeing the transcendental form of the deity. He thought, "Oh Krishna, for so long I have wanted to see you, and now I can." He saw the image in the temple as non-different from Krishna as he exists in the kingdom of God. Sri Chaitanya's eyes were indeed smeared with the salve of love, and he relished the absolute nature of Krishna's form, which was fully revealed to him in the deity of Jagannath. Sri Chaitanya was so overcome with bliss that he could not even utter Lord Jagannatha's name. Instead, he simply called out Jaga, 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 and in a preponderance of ecstasy, he fell unconsciousness at the temple floor. The temple custodians were bewildered by the actions of Lord Chaitanya and immediately ran to get Bhattacharya, an acknowledged authority on spiritual matters. Once the Bhattacharya entered the room, he suspected that Chaitanya's loss of consciousness was not an ordinary event. He saw it as instead a rare symptom of divine love exhibited only by the most elevated souls. He therefore asked the custodians not to disturb the Lord, but instead to carefully carry him to his home. As a scholar of Vedas and a scientific-minded academician, the Bhattacharya wanted to study the entranced condition of the Lord in a systematic and methodological way. By this sort of careful analysis, he sought to substantiate the ecstatic symptoms exhibited by Lord Chaitanya. The Bhattacharya was not the kind of man who could be influenced by external physical appearances. He knew that there were many unscrupulous people who would feign symptoms of ecstasy to gain personal fame and distinction. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya thus tested the condition of the Lord in the light of scientific evidence and authentic scriptures. He checked Chaitanya's pulse, heartbeat, stomach movements, and other vital signs, and he found that the Lord's bodily functions were all in complete suspension. But when a cotton swab was placed in front of the Lord's nostrils, Bhattacharya could see the tiny fibers slightly moving as a result of his exhalation. Sarvabhauma could thus understand that Lord Chaitanya's trance was genuine. His experiments completed, he tried to revive the Lord in a standard manner. However, the Chaitanya did not respond to ordinary treatment. The only way that he could be revived was by hearing the holy name of the Lord. But this fact was not known to Bhattacharya. The Lord's companions, headed by Nityananda Prabhu, soon arrived and they began to loudly chant the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. To the Bhattacharya's great surprise, the Lord was quickly revived from his trance. Impressed, the Bhattacharya invited the Lord and his followers to become his guest of honor at his home. Gopinath Acharya, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya's brother-in-law, fully believed that in Lord Chaitanya's divinity and tried to convince the Bhattacharya that Chaitanya was the predicted incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. While the Bhattacharya admitted that Chaitanya must indeed be a great empowered devotee, he did not believe that he was God incarnate. The two men, however, did not debate this point on the basis of sentiment. Each cited evidence from the Vedic scriptures to support his claim. There are many self-serving impostors who claim to be God or who are proclaimed as God by their followers on the basis of sentimental fervor, but no man can become God by popular vote or by haranguing of scholars. The genuine incarnations of the God are described in Vedic literature, and it was with reference to these scriptures that Sarvabhauma and his brother-in-law engaged in dialogue. Although still unconvinced of Sri Chaitanya's divinity, the Bhattacharya felt great paternal affection for the Lord, who was young enough to be his grandson. Out of this affection, he was anxious to recite and explain the Vedanta Sutra, for these texts summarize the philosophical knowledge of the Vedas and would help the new sannyasi on his path to perfection. Lord Chaitanya agreed to hear from him, and out of love did so for 7 consecutive days. The Lord listened attentively, not saying a word. But on the 8th day, the Bhattacharya explained, Krishna Chaitanya, do you understand what I have been saying? I have been instructing you for the past 1 week, but you haven't asked any questions or said anything about my explanations. Lord Chaitanya replied to the Bhattacharya's concern, yes, I am a great fool, but since you have asked me to hear you, I have been trying to listen as a matter of duty, although I cannot follow what it has been saying. When the Bhattacharya asked the Lord just why he cannot understand, the Lord replied, actually, I can understand the Vedanta Sutra very clearly. It is your explanation that confuses me. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya had been explaining the sutras according to the impersonalistic school of Shankaracharya, that is to say, he explained them in terms of logic, grammatical wordplay, and mental speculation. Lord Chaitanya indicated that he did not accept this method. The Bhattacharya, on the other hand, was skeptical that the Vedanta Sutra could be understood without relying on such interpretations and literary devices. So he insisted upon hearing the Lord's explanation of the sutras. Lord Chaitanya responded that no interpretation was needed in order to understand Vedanta Sutra. The Vedanta Sutra is as bright and clear as the sun, he said. But if someone tries to interpret it by mental speculation and give it his own meaning, he covers this sun with a cloud of his imagination. The Lord further said that because the sutras were already perfect, there was no need to adjust their meaning. In this way, the Lord was advocating the standard way in which adherents accept the Vedic literature. Being given by the Lord, the texts are considered already perfect. In India, they are used even today as the last word in philosophical or pragmatic argument. For example, it is stated in the Vedas that if one touches the stool of any animal, one becomes contaminated and has to take a bath. Elsewhere in the Vedic literature, it is stated that cow dung is purifying. This appears to be contradictory, but the followers of the Vedas accept both of these statements as indisputable facts. The apparent contradiction, incidentally, has been resolved by modern science. It has been discovered that cow dung has an antiseptic properties. In fact, cow dung today is used in India as an effective disinfectant and as both as pollutize and as a cleaning agent. Lord Chaitanya thought that the Vedic wisdom was meant to be accepted as it is, rather than read some obscure, esoteric or abstract meaning into each text. One should accept the direct meaning as given in disciplic succession from the master to disciple for countless eons. Lord Chaitanya then explained all the sutras in a clear and direct way and with extensive quotations from Vedic literature. He conclusively proved, based on these texts, that the supreme truth is held to be Krishna, the supreme person of Godhead. Rather than pointing to the impersonal absolute, as the Bhattacharya had suggested, Vedic literature ultimately directs one to the personal absolute, the cause of all causes. The Chaitanya Mahaprabhu made this point obvious and apparent. Overwhelmed by Lord Chaitanya's simple yet profound explanation, the Bhattacharya was awestruck and could not utter a word. To encourage him, Lord Chaitanya said, "My dear Bhattacharya, there is nothing wonderful in my explanations. Please take it from me that devotional service unto the person of God is the highest goal of human life." He then quoted a famous verse from Srimad Bhagavatam and often referred to as the Atma Rama verse to prove his point that the ultimate path of spiritual life is to worship the Supreme Person. All varieties of genuine realized souls, although free from material bondage, desire to render unalloyed devotion service unto the Supreme Person of Godhead. This means the Lord possesses transcendental qualities and can therefore attract everyone, including liberated souls. Srimad Bhagavatam 1.7.10. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was eager to hear Lord Chaitanya's explanation of the Atmarama verse. But the Lord said, "First you explain it, then I will." Bhattacharya then explained the verse in 9 different ways using his method of logic and grammar. Lord Chaitanya thanked him for his scholarly presentation and explained the same verse in 64 distinct different ways, never touching the first 9 given by Bhattacharya. The Lord's explanations of the Atma Rama verse were superior to anything the Bhattacharya had ever heard. Stunned, the Bhattacharya realized that no earthly creature could possibly articulate such explanations. Although he had previously debated with his brother-in-law about the divinity of Lord Chaitanya, he could not avoid inseparable conclusion that the Lord was indeed God incarnate. The Bhattacharya had agreed that all scriptural evidences point to this, but now the practical evidence of the Lord's inconceivable intellect pierced his reservations. Feeling like an offender for not previously recognizing the true identity of the Lord, the Bhattacharya threw himself at the Lord's feet in total surrender. Chaitanya, being greatly pleased that such a distinguished scholar had humbly surrendered himself, revealed his identity as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. First, he revealed his 4-armed form as Vishnu, the opulent ruler of the spiritual world. Then, he displayed a very confidential 6-armed form, revealing Krishna's 2 arms playing on his flute, Ramachandra's 2 arms with bow and arrow, and his own 2 arms carrying the staff of renunciation and the water pot. Finally, he bestowed upon Bhattacharya a vision of his original 2-armed form as Krishna. Upon witnessing the Lord's divinity, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya spontaneously composed 100 verses in praise of him. Of these verses, 2 are considered most important, for they reveal the essence of Chaitanya's mission in this world. Let me surrender unto the Personality of Godhead, who has now appeared as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He is the ocean of all mercy and has come down to teach us material detachment, learning, and devotional service to himself. Since pure devotional service unto the Personality of Godhead has been lost in the oblivion of time, the Lord has appeared to renovate the principles, and therefore I offer my respectful obeisances unto his lotus feet. Mahaprabhu appreciated these verses so much that he embraced the Bhattacharya, who at once became filled with greater ecstasy. In this way, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, the great logician and grammarian, became a great devotee of the Lord. Enlivened by this profound spiritual conquest, Mahaprabhu decided to take tour to South India and spread the holy name throughout the countryside. But before leaving Puri, Bhattacharya asked the Lord to look for a great devotee named Ramananda Rai, while in the south, for his particular Mahatma would be great assistant to Mahaprabhu's mission. The year 1510 was thus full of important events in the history of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. The Lord accepted sannyasa in the very beginning of that year. After a month of extensive travels, he reached Jagannath Puri and as soon encountered Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. And as spring approached, the Lord began his historic 4,000-mile pilgrimage throughout the south. Going from village to village, Mahaprabhu vivaciously sung the holy name and changed people's lives with his electrifying devotion. After miraculously curing a leper named Vasudeva at a village called Kurmastana, Lord Chaitanya continued his South Indian pilgrimage by proceeding to Jayada Narsimha, known as Narsimhachalam, where a beautiful deity of the Lord's half man, half lion manifested is still being worshipped. The temple is located 5 miles to the northwest of Vishakhapatnam in Andhra Pradesh. Here, Lord Chaitanya taught the eternal truths of Vaishnavism to many sincere souls. Moving further south, Mahaprabhu followed the old route from Sabaran near Nasimachalam and soon entered the Rajamundri district, where he went to the Godavari river to bathe. Seated on the western bank, he noticed the governor of Rajamundri, Ramananda Rai, the saintly person for whom Sarva Bhattacharya said that Mahaprabhu should look. The governor was easily recognizable because he had some 100 servants with him and his entourage was surrounded by great fanfare and musical celebration. Nonetheless, he humbly walked over to the beautiful effulgent sannyasi and introduced himself. I am the unworthy Ramananda Rai. Although acting in some important capacity, I am simply a low-born individual. Hearing this modest introduction, Mahaprabhu embraced him and they both relished utterances of Krishna's name. Ramananda Rai was not an ordinary personality. According to Vaishnava tradition, he was actually an incarnation of the primary gopi named Vishaka, Radharani's chief attendant in her service to Krishna. And sometimes it is said that he also embodies the personality of Arjuna, Krishna's dear friend, to whom he revealed the philosophical instructions of Bhagavad Gita as well. And we shall see Mahaprabhu himself values the instructions he receives from Sri Ramananda as the highest spiritual knowledge. Some biographers point out that while the Lord received initiation into the holy name from Ishwarapuri and sannyasa initiation from Keshav Bharati for the entrance into the highest realm of spirituality, he took Raga Marga initiation from Ramananda Rai. Of course, none of these three even considered themselves Mahaprabhu's guru in any real sense. But such pastimes were enacted for the sake of setting an example to the world to follow. At their first meeting, Mahaprabhu and Sri Ramananda agreed to come together once again before nightfall. After taking their evening baths at the Godavari, they sat on its cooling banks to discuss the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. Before Sri Ramananda and the Lord could even exchange their simple pleasantries, the Lord asked him to quote some spiritual verses about the ultimate goal of life. Ramananda Rai replied at once, a person who is sincere in his occupation duty would gradually develop a sense of God consciousness. He also quoted a verse from Vishnu Purana 3.8.9, which states that the Supreme Lord is worshipped by one's occupational duty and there is no alternative for such satisfying him. The idea is that if one uses one's God-driven propensity in the Lord's service, then one is properly situated and using one's ability and gradually reach the perfection as a result. For this purpose, the Vedas divide society into 4 natural sections: the intellectuals and priests, Brahmanas, the administrators and the warriors, Kshatriyas, the merchants and farmers, Vaishyas, and the laborers and artisans, Shudras. For each of the 4 natural Vedic divisions of society, there are prescribed rules and regulations as well as occupational functions. The main emphasis, however, is on one's natural quality and on the work one is inclined to perform. Unlike the Hindu caste system, as later witnessed by the British, the original system of social stratification had little to do with birthright. In this sense, the Vedas simply gave formal definition to that which normally occurs in nature. In addition to the 4 orders, the Vedas recognize 4 spiritual orders as well. Celebrate student life, Brahmacharya, marriage, Grihastha, retirement, Vanaprastha, and renunciation, Sannyasa. These 4 progressive stages were recommended for the gradual upliftment of humanity to ultimately attain the spiritual platform. Each level was characterized by newer and deeper modes of realization and commitment. Gradually, by following this system, one would become ready for renunciation, which was necessary to both face death gracefully and successfully enter into the kingdom of God. Ramananda Rai stated that those who rigidly follow this system could please the Supreme Lord and reach perfection in this lifetime. After hearing Sri Ramananda expounded on this Varnashrama system, as it is properly called, Mahaprabhu readily acknowledged its validity. Still, the Lord cautioned Varnashrama is merely external. The highest perfection transcends even the proper execution of Varnashrama. The Lord then asked Ramananda Rai to dive deeper into the truths of transcendence. In response, Ramananda quoted a verse from Bhagavad Gita 9.27, in which Lord Krishna recommends that everything one does, all one's daily activities, be done as an offering unto him. Although this verse details with total surrender in that it says one should give up the results of one's work to the Lord as an offering, Mahaprabhu was still dissatisfied, saying that this is a principle that is even higher. There is a principle that is even higher. Previously, Sri Ramananda recommended the Varnashrama system. He now stressed, however, that in the order for the system to work, all of one's occupational duties had to be centered on loving service of the Lord. Otherwise, the whole system is a waste of time. This was certainly true. Mahaprabhu agreed, but it was still only superficial. If you know something more, Lord Chaitanya encouraged him, then go further. Sri Ramananda next proposed that one should abandon all occupational duties altogether and simply develop detachment from the material world, which would in turn allow one to rise to the transcendental plane. In other words, he was now saying that all activity within society should be rejected and that total surrender to God should permeate one's existence. As evidence, he cited Lord Krishna's final instructions in Bhagavad Gita. Abandon all varieties of religion and simply surrender unto me. I will protect you from all sinful reaction. Do not fear, worry or hesitate. Bhagavad Gita 18.66. Lord Chaitanya also rejected this third proposal, for he wanted to demonstrate that such renunciation in and for itself was not sufficient. Sri Ramananda then took it further, having said that one should render devotion service by renouncing fruitive activities. He was now saying that the devotion service with appropriate knowledge and spiritual realization is much more superior. When Mahaprabhu heard this, he smiled broadly and asked Sri Ramananda to go a little further. For although this is correct, there is slightly higher platform. Finally, Ramananda Rai quoted scriptural references for the highest accomplishment in spiritual realization to render pure devotion service without any attachment even to the subtle attainments of knowledge and liberation. This answer catapulted Lord Chaitanya into ecstatic bliss, for his mission was to teach such unmixed devotion service without any tinge of material conditioning. At once Mahaprabhu said, yes, this is it. Lord Chaitanya wanted Ramananda to now expound on advanced devotion service, and so he did. When Bhakti Yoga is elevated to the personal platform, Sri Ramananda said, it is called as Prema Bhakti. In the early stages of self-realization, the particular relationship between the Lord and the devotee is not yet established. But when Prema Bhakti develops, the relationship, rasa, with the Supreme Person of Godhead unfolds, manifesting as one of 5 human-like exchanges, including passion, adoration, servitorship, friendship, parenthood, and conjugal love. Since the neutral position of passive adoration is fundamental, Ramananda Rai began by discussing the level of servitude wherein the devotee is eternally relishing the mood of a servant from his divine master. Worship in this mood is often full of opulence and regalia, motivated by such a sense of awe and reverence without the full sweetness that manifests in the remaining 3 relationships. Mahaprabhu was enjoying this explanation, and Ramananda Rai proceeded to tell the Lord about the fraternal relationship one may have with the Krishna, which is considered to be on a higher platform than the master-servant relationship. In fraternity, one's reverence matures into affection and awareness of the Lord's superiority begins to dwindle. As a result, one can relish a distinct relationship with the God in the mood of friendship. But Chaitanya's appreciation for these subjects was beyond the words. He simply kept telling Sri Ramananda, go further, go further. Understanding that the Lord's mind, Sri Ramananda immediately discussed the conjugal relationship in which one has to intimate pastime of confidential love with the Supreme Person. Then he backtracked, discussing more elaborately relationship in neutrality, fraternity, and paternity. Finally, he elaborated upon the conjugal relationship as the perfect state of love for God. In one sense, he cautioned all of these relationships are absolute and thus equal. However, in the realm of spiritual variegatedness, there are definite distinctions, and the conjugal relationship is considered the highest. This particular kind of transcendent relationship, moreover, is perfectly expressed only in the activities of gopis, the simple cowherd girls of Krishna who, out of pure love for him, knew nothing beyond his service. The love under discussion, of course, is not the sort to which we are accustomed in the material world. It is not beleaguered by the unsavory characteristics of the mundane sphere, superficiality, carnality, and temporality. In sharp contrast, the spiritual love of the gopis is profound, wholesome, and eternal. In comparison to this love, the mundane counterpart may be considered as nothing more than lust. Ramananda Rai described the difference between the two and how material lust can be transformed into spiritual love by the process of Krishna consciousness. Mahaprabhu could not control himself. Upon hearing this discussion of Gopi's love, his bliss knew no bounds, and both he and Ramananda Rai were saturated in the love of God. Although they both agreed that this was the last word in Krishna consciousness, Mahaprabhu asked Ramananda to go even further. Surprised for it, difficult to imagine that there is nothing superior to the conjugal relationship, Sri Ramananda expounded the details of the foremost of all gopis, Srimati Radharani, who is none other than the Lord's eternal consort. Srimati Radharani's position is extremely confidential and is only understood by the most advanced devotees. She is the female counterpart of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Her love for Krishna is perfectly complete and her beauty attracts the heart of the Supreme Attractor. Her attributes are so overpowering, in fact, that she makes Krishna self-conscious and he becomes bewildered by her beauty and the love that she feels for him. So intense is her love, the scriptures inform us that it makes the standard color of love, Krishna's color, change from dark into glowing light, her own hue, Ujjvala. In this totally spiritual experience, as Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami says, lover, beloved and love itself dance in one body. And this is personified in Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. As Ramananda elaborated on the esoteric nature of Sri Chaitanya, Sri Radha, he explained that she is the embodiment of Krishna's love and as such she is his pleasure potency, without which the Lord and all his living entities could not enjoy any bliss or relish any relationship. Sri Ramananda continues to expound on Sri Radha's confidential characteristics. Lord Chaitanya, hearing Ramananda Rai's discussion of Sri Radha, melted into a puddle of ecstasy. Finally, gathering his wits about him, Lord Chaitanya begged Sri Ramananda, please go further, further. Ramananda Rai then informed Lord Chaitanya that there was another highly evolved spiritual topic known as Prema Vilasa Vivarta, the essence of which many may be described as follows. Unlike their material counterpart, transcendental loving affairs are as relishable during separation as they are in union. But such affairs manifest a special sweetness when experienced in separation, culminating in a sort of spiritual longing, a sublime desperation that otherwise remains unknown. This desperation leads to a sort of mystical illusion that serves to deepen one's love. Srimati Radharani, for instance, once mistook a black tamala tree for Krishna and embraced it for a love in separation. Such a mistake is a manifestation of the level called as Prema Vilasa Vivarta. This advanced stage of spiritual life is rarely achieved in this world. In an attempt to convey this esoterica to Lord Chaitanya, Sri Ramananda began to recite a poem that embodied these higher truths. The Lord immediately covered Ramananda's mouth, however, symbolically indicating that materialists, philosophers, and even spiritualists and devotees of a lower order cannot enter into such confidential understanding of spiritual reality. Mahaprabhu finally relented, and Sri Ramananda Rai began to sing two verses that reflect the sum and substance of spiritual life. After these verses were sung, Mahaprabhu said, "What you have just uttered embodies the ultimate goal of life, and only by your mercy have I come to understand it conclusively." In this way, the Lord and Ramananda Rai discussed the highest spiritual philosophy for some time. Sri Ramananda went deeper and deeper into completely spiritual, loving exchanges of Sri Radha and Krishna, and Mahaprabhu kept insisting that he go further still. Soon Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said to Ramananda, I came to you to understand the transcendental loving affairs of Lord of the divine love. But and now I am very much satisfied that you have described them so nicely. I can understand from your pure lips that this is the highest loving state of Krishna consciousness. Ramananda Rai replied, I do not know how it is that I am saying these things, but I do not know that you have mystically made me to speak. I am simply repeating your message. In this way, Ramananda Rai acknowledged that all truth emanates from the Supreme Lord, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Satisfied with Ramananda Rai, Lord Chaitanya revealed his essential ontological form as a combination of Sri Radha and Krishna. Blessed with this vision, Ramananda Rai became an important follower in Mahaprabhu's line and eventually settled in Puri, where he served as one of the Lord's most intimate associates. After parting ways with Sri Ramananda, Mahaprabhu travelled throughout the south, visiting temples and purifying the fortunate souls whom he met. By July 1510, he arrived in Srirangam, a main center for Sri Vaishnava lineage, and met with Venkata Bhatta, Prabodhananda Saraswati, and the young Gopala Bhatta. He stayed there for 4 months and then travelled further south, converting Buddhists, Mayavadis, and countless others to his particular brand of Vaishnavism. After 2 years, he completed his 4,000-mile walking pilgrimage to the south and returned to Puri. Although his first stay in Puri was relatively short, he would now stay for almost 2 years. Puri, as his mother had requested, was becoming his headquarters, and many of his followers from Navadip would either move there or make regular pilgrimage. In 1512, when Mahaprabhu returned from South India to live in Puri, King Prataparudra was naturally eager to talk with him, having heard his glories from Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. Nonetheless, the Chaitanya had adopted the role of a monk, sannyasi, to teach pure devotion service and strictly followed the injunctions forbidding a sannyasi to meet people absorbed in material affairs. Therefore, although the king was a great devotee, Mahaprabhu desired to use the king as an example and was therefore reluctant to meet him. However, on behalf of pious king, Sarva Bhattacharya boldly approached Mahaprabhu saying, King Prataparudra is very anxious to meet you. He wanted me to ask if you would see him. As soon as Mahaprabhu heard his proposal, he covered his eyes with his hands and said, My dear Bhattacharya, why are you making such an undesirable request? I am in the renounced order of life, and for me to meet a king is as dangerous as meeting a woman. To meet either for a sannyasi would be just like drinking poison. The Lord continued, for a man seriously desiring to cross the ocean of material miseries and obtain the Lord's mercy, seeing either a material or a lusty woman is more abominable than drinking poison. Sarva Bhattacharya replied, My dear Lord, what you have said is of course correct, but this king is not an ordinary. He is a great devotee and a servant of Lord Jagannath. Although the king is certainly a great devotee, said Lord Chaitanya, as a sannyasi, I must still consider him a venomous snake. Bhattacharya, if you continue to speak like this, you will never see me here again. Afraid of further angering the Lord, the Bhattacharya returned home and began to meditate on the matter. Meanwhile, King Prataparudra, who had gone to his capital city of Cuttack, sent a letter to the Bhattacharya begging him to get the Lord's consent for a meeting. The Bhattacharya immediately returned a letter to the king, explaining that Lord Chaitanya had not given his permission. The king in turn responded quickly with another letter. Please appeal to all the devotees associated with the Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and submit my petition at the lotus feet of the Lord. By the mercy of the devotees, one can attain the shelter of the Lord's lotus feet. If Lord Chaitanya does not show mercy to me, I shall give up my kingdom, become a mendicant, and beg from door to door. Sarva Bhattacharya decided to meet with all the devotees and describe the king's wishes, showing the letter to each one. Everyone was astonished that King Prataparudra had so much devotion for Lord Chaitanya that he was prepared to give up the kingdom. However, one devotee said, the Lord will never consent to meet the king, and if we ask him to do so, he will feel intense unhappiness. We shall go once again to the Lord, the Bhattacharya suggested, but we shall not request him to meet the king. Rather, we shall simply describe the king's good behavior. Having reached this decision, they all went to the place where Lord Chaitanya was staying. When the Lord saw them, he asked, "Why have you all come here?" Although they had intent to speak, they could not utter a word. "I see that you want to say something," said Sri Chaitanya, "but you do not speak. What is the reason?" Nityananda Prabhu, the Lord's closest associate, answered, "We want to tell you something, but we are afraid to speak on such a delicate matter. Nevertheless, we must inform you that unless King Pradrabhuda sees you, he will become a beggar. It is the nature of an attached man to give up his life if he does not attain his desired object." Knowing the king's seriousness and devotion, the devotees were trying to save him from committing suicide. Nityananda Prabhu then suggested, "There is a way by which you need not meet the king, but which would enable him to continue living. If you would mercifully send one of your garments to him, he would remain alive, hoping to see you sometime in future." Lord Chaitanya agreed to this proposal, and Nityananda Prabhu then obtained a garment used by him and delivered to Sarva Bhattacharya, who in turn sent it to the king. When the king received the sacred cloth, he began to worship it exactly as he would have worshipped the Lord directly. Soon, King Prataparudra came to Jagannath Puri from Cuttack, along with his entourage of secretaries, ministers, and military officers. Also with him was one of his governors, Ramananda Rai, who, as we had just discussed, had met Lord Chaitanya during his tour to South India and had that time established a close friendship with the Lord. In fact, Mahaprabhu had asked Ramananda Raya to resign from his governmental post and join him in Jagannath Puri so that he could talk over every day about the activities of Lord Krishna and their understanding and share their understanding. Thus, when Ramananda arrived in Jagannath Puri, he hurriedly, with great anticipation to see Lord Chaitanya. After they greeted each other, he said to the Lord, "I informed King Prataparudra of your order. I said, 'Your Majesty, I cannot continue my political activities. I desire only to stay at the lotus feet of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Kindly give me permission.' Upon hearing your name, he immediately rose from his throne and embraced me. My dear Lord, as soon as the king heard your holy name, he was overwhelmed by great ecstatic love. He granted me full salary as a pension and requested me to engage in your service without anxiety. Then he humbly said, 'Because I am most fallen and abominable, I am unfit to receive an interview with the Lord.' Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Krishna himself, and service to him makes life successful. He is very merciful, and I hope that he will allow me an interview in one of my future lives. My Lord," concluded Ramananda Rai, "I don't think I have even a fraction of King Prataparudra's ecstatic love for you, and yet you are willing to see me, but you neglect me." "My dear Ramananda," the Lord replied, "you are the foremost of Krishna devotees, and whoever serves you is blessed by Krishna. The king has shown so much devotion for you that Krishna will certainly accept you." In the days that followed, the Lord enjoyed the company of Ramananda Rai, talking with him about Lord Krishna and his passions. While they were absorbed in these conversations, King Prataparudra called for Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. The king allowed him to sit in an elegant chair and offered him respectful greetings. He then began lamenting, "Lord Chaitanya has descended just to deliver all kinds of sinful, low-born persons. But has Lord Chaitanya incarnated to deliver all kinds of sinners except a king named Prataparudra? If he is determined to avoid me," cried the king, "then I am determined to give up my life." King Prataparudra finished his plea with tears in his eyes. "If I do not receive Mahaprabhu's mercy, both my body and my kingdom are useless." The Bhattacharya was astonished at the king's strength of purpose. He thought that such determination would be impossible for a worldly man. Feeling for Prataparudra, the Bhattacharya said, "My dear king, do not worry. Your firm determination will surely inspire Lord Chaitanya to bestow his mercy upon you. Only pure love can attract the Supreme Lord, and since your love for Mahaprabhu is very deep, he will undoubtedly be merciful to you." The Bhattacharya felt great compassion for the king and wanted to help him as much as he could. By making the following suggestion, he blessed the king that he might receive the mercy of the Lord. "There is one way for you to see Lord Chaitanya directly. On the day of Ratha Yatra festival, he he will dance before the deity in great ecstatic love. Afterwards, he will enter the Gundicha garden. At that time, you should go there alone in plain dress and read the 5 chapters of Srimad Bhagavatam about Krishna's dancing with gopis, cowherd girls. Mahaprabhu will be in a mood of ecstatic love and he will embrace you, knowing you to be a pure devotee. Do not worry, the Lord has already changed his mind about you due to Ramananda Rai's description about your pure love for him. After thus encouraging the king, Sarva Bhattacharya returned home. In the days that followed, Ramananda Raya would remind the Lord of King's desire to see him. Using expert diplomacy, Ramananda Raya gradually softened the Lord's heart. My Lord, Sri Ramananda said, you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You have nothing to fear from anyone. Lord Chaitanya objected. I am not the Supreme Personality of Godhead. I am just an ordinary human being and I fear public opinion. As soon as the general public finds a little fault in a sannyasi, they advertise it like a wildfire. A black spot of ink on a white cloth cannot be hidden. It is always very prominent. The traditional commentators explain that Mahaprabhu, as the perfect devotee, never wanted to be identified with God. He, of course, was aware of his divinity and had even proven it in several occasions in the past to Ramananda Rai and to many others. Yet, he also felt that if people were to find any discrepancy in his behavior, such an association with worldly mind king, their criticism would minimize the importance of the sannyasa order and hamper his mission of preaching Krishna consciousness. My dear Lord, Ramananda Rai continued, you have delivered so many sinful people, but King Prataprudra is not at all sinful. He is actually the Lord's servant and a devotee. There may be milk in a big pot, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu replied. But if it is contaminated by one drop of liquor, it is untouchable. The king certainly possesses many good qualities, but simply by taking the title king, he has infected everything. However, if you are still very eager for me to meet the king, please bring his son to meet me first. The Vedas say that the son is a representative of the father. So meeting King Pratap Rudra's son would be just as good as meeting the king himself. Ramananda Rai then went to tell the king about his talk with Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and following the Lord's order, he brought back the king's son to see him. The young prince, blackish complexion, large lotus eyes, yellow garments, and jeweled ornaments remind everyone of Lord Krishna. Here is a great devotee, Lord Chaitanya said. For anyone who sees him remembers the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna. Just by sending me this boy, the king has put me in a very much in his depth. Seeing all this, the devotees praised the boy for his great spiritual fortune. Sri Ramananda took the boy back to the king's palace. The king was very glad to hear of his son's experience, and when he embraced him, he also felt ecstatic love, just as if he had touched Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu directly. The day came for Lord Jagannath's annual Rath Yatra festival. After bathing early in the morning, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu saw the deity of Lord Jagannath transferred from his throne to the cart, while musicians playing various melodies and tens and thousands looked on. Although King Prataprudra was the exalted owner of the royal throne, he wanted to do some menial service to Lord Jagannatha. Therefore, he personally swept the road with gold-handled broom and sprinkled the road with sandalwood scented water. Seeing the king sweeping the street and sprinkling it with water, Lord Chaitanya became very happy. As the huge carts moved along the road towards the Gundicha temple, the devotees danced and chanted Hare Krishna with great enthusiasm. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu divided the devotees into 7 parties with two drums in each group. King Prataprudra was astonished by the tumultuous and enchanting sound of the Sankirtan. All these devotees chanted the holy names in great ecstasy, with tears falling from their eyes. And Lord Chaitanya wandered through all 7 groups, chanting Hari Hari. Raising his arms, he shouted all glories to Lord Jagannatha. King Prataprudra could hardly believe his eyes. Suddenly, he saw Lord Chaitanya simultaneously appear in 7 different Sankirtana parties. Appreciating the Lord's mystic opulence, the king became stunned with ecstatic love. Although Mahaprabhu had previously revoked the king, he now showed his favor upon him by revealing his transcendental power. Although most of the other devotees could not see the Lord appearing in 7 places, they were also overwhelmed with spiritual ecstasy just by seeing the Lord his dancing. Everyone was dancing and chanting as the Lord echoed everywhere. As the sound echoed everywhere, Lord Chaitanya gracefully danced through the crowd. When the servants of Lord Jagannatha had pulled the carts of the Lord as far as Guindicha's garden, they stopped, and all the devotees offered the deity some simple food they had prepared. The king with his queens, the ministers, and all other residents of the Jagannath Puri offered preparations to the Lord, and a large crowd gathered to watch. At that time, Lord Chaitanya stopped his dancing and went into the garden to rest. The Lord was covered with perspiration, and he enjoyed the cool, fragrant breezes of the garden. All the devotees were chanting and dancing with him. He also went there and rested under different trees. When Lord when Lord Chaitanya was resting peacefully, King Prataprudra entered the garden. Following Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya's instructions, the king had replaced his royal garments with the simple clothes of a devotee. He was so humble that he first offered respects with folded hands to all the devotees in the garden. Then, taking courage, he fell down and touched the Lord's feet of the Lord. Finally, the king started to recite verses about Krishna's dancing with the gopis. When Lord Chaitanya heard these verses, he was so pleased beyond limit and said again and again, "Go on reciting, go on reciting." At that moment, King Prataprudra recited a very special verse. "My Lord, the nectar of your words and the descriptions of your activities are the life and soul of those who are always aggrieved in this material world. These narrations are transmitted by exalted personalities who can eradicate all sinful reactions. Whoever hears these narrations attains all good fortune. These narrations are broadcast all over the world and they are filled with spiritual power. Those who spread the message of Godhead are certainly the most munificent welfare workers." Bhagavatam 10.31.9. As soon as the king recited this verse, Lord Chaitanya embraced him and cried, "You are the most munificent. You have given me more invaluable gems, but I have nothing to give you in return." Saying this, the Lord began to recite the same verse again and again. Both the king and Lord Chaitanya were trembling and tears were flowing from their eyes. Finally, the Lord asked, "Who are you? You have done so much for me. All of a sudden, you have come here and made me drink the nectar of Lord Krishna's pastime." The king replied, "My Lord, I am most obedient to you. It is my ambition that you accept me as the servant of your servants." The Lord Chaitanya displayed some of his divine opulences to the king, revealing his identity as God. But forbade him to disclose these secrets to anyone. Although Mahaprabhu knew who the king was, he pretended not to know. Seeing that the king had received the Lord's special mercy, the devotees became blissful and praised his good fortune. After submissively offering prayers to the devotees and obeisances to Lord Chaitanya, the king left the garden. In this way, King Prataprudra received the mercy of the Lord Chaitanya. Ordinarily, the king would not have had a chance to meet the Lord. But when the Lord saw that he was serving Lord Jagannatha as a menial sweeper and that he had attained the mercy of the devotees, he bestowed his full mercy upon him. In the years that followed, King Prataprudra had many more opportunities to render service to Lord Jagannatha, and he maintained his humble attitude in spite of his wealth and power. Even to this day, King Prataprudра's descendants remember his example. At the Rath Yatra festival each year, the present king of Orissa takes a golden-handled broom and sweeps the road in front of Jagannath's cart. Later in the year 1530, almost after 2 years of memorable action with his increasing number of followers, the Lord was ready to travel once again, primarily to see Vrindavana, the place of Krishna's pastimes. However, this was not to be. Amara and Santosh, two learned brothers who served in the Muslim government as Dabir Kasa and Shakara Malik, secretary and financial officer, had been writing to him and begged him to show them his mercy. Consequently, the Lord travelled only as far as Ramakeli, where the two brothers met him, and there he accepted them as his followers. They became known as Rupa and Sanatana in the year 1489, 1564. Rupa and Sanatana Goswamis. Their meeting with Mahaprabhu was to become a great turning point in Gaudiya Vaishnava history. It was at this juncture that Mahaprabhu instructed them to write literature documenting the intricate science of Krishna consciousness and also to excavate the forgotten places of Lord Krishna's pastimes in Vraja. This they did, and their work constitutes the mammoth achievement that they lay at the foundation of Gaudiya Vaishnava movement. After giving inspiration and direction to Rupa and Sanatana, Mahaprabhu returned to Puri, but after a short time, he started again for Vrindavana. Traveling with one attendant, now a Brahmana named Balabhadra, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu walked through the dense jungle of Jharkhand towards the Ganges at Banaras. If he were not an eyewitness, Balabhadra would scarcely have believed what had happened, accompanied the Lord throughout the forest. Chanting the holy name in complete ecstasy, Mahaprabhu induced lions, tigers, and elephants to sing along in their respective tongues. Indeed, it is said that his sweet, melodious voice touched the soul of every creature in this park, and it inspired them to quickly reach the level of perfect consciousness. After some time, he reached Banaras, also called as Varanasi or Kasi, and bathed in the Ganges tributary called as Manikarnaka Ghat. He then met Tapan Mishra, who had received instructions from him years earlier when they were in East Bengal. Mishra was now living in Banaras according to advice once given to him by Lord Mahaprabhu himself, and he was acting as a Lord's host during his stay there. Eager to reach Vrindavana, however, Mahaprabhu only stayed in Banaras for 10 days. En route, he stopped at Prayag, now Allahabad, and took his bath in Triveni Sangamam, which is where the Ganges meets the Saraswati and river Yamuna. Swooning and singing in uncontrollable bliss, the Lord happily splashed about with Balabhadra in Lord Krishna's favorite river. Mahaprabhu soon reached the city of Mathura, where almost 5,000 years ago Lord Krishna was born. Here, Lord Chaitanya prostrated himself in the holy dust with total reverence for the Lord of his life. He then bathed at the famous Vishram Ghat, which is now bordered by Dori Bazar Road. According to the Vaishnava tradition, Lord Krishna rested at this place after the killing the demon Kamsa. The Skanda Purana says that by once bathing there, one can wash away more sins that one can be able to commit. From Vishram Ghat, Mahaprabhu went to Janmabhoomi, the Lord Krishna's birthplace, and there he offered prayers to the Lord, the deity of Keshava Deva. This deity is still worshipped in the same place, but is now overshadowed by a mosque that was built in the vicinity by the dictator Aurangzeb. This way, Mahaprabhu travelled all over Vraja, rediscovering holy places such as Radhakund and relishing the ecstasy in being in proximity to Krishna. Although Vrindavana had an incomparable spiritual attraction for the Lord, he did not remain there for long. Late in January, in the year 1516, Mahaprabhu and his servant Balabhadra, along with Balabhadra's assistant, a Rajput chief named Krishna Das, and a humble Brahmana who took the Lord in his tour to Vrindavana, left Akrura Ghat to start their return journey to Puri via Prayag, Allahabad. There, the Lord met Rupa Goswami, whom he had previously initiated at Ramkeli, and to whom he now delivered invaluable instructions. It was here that Mahaprabhu revealed Rasa Tattva, as he heard it from Ramananda Rai. After revealing the secrets of love of Godhead to Rupa Goswami and then sending him to Vrindavana to continue the Lord's working of rediscovering holy places, Mahaprabhu proceeded towards Puri via Banaras. Here, the Lord met Sanatana Goswami and instructed him in the Bhakti religion, much as he had just instructed Rupa, his younger brother. While in Banaras, Mahaprabhu met Prakasananda Saraswati, the leader of tens and thousands of impersonalistic renunciants, and engaged in an elaborate debate with him. The central theme of their discussion was Vedanta, the ultimate philosophical thesis presented by Srila Vyasadeva, the divinely inspired author of the Vedic literature. Vedanta literally means the end of knowledge, and so Lord Chaitanya explained that the real end of knowledge was Krishna and devotion service to Krishna. He explained that this truth was elaborately developed in Bhagavata Purana and then went on to scientifically describe the chanting process by which one can attain self-realization in this age. He quoted the Vedic literature, chant the holy name, chant the holy name, chant the holy name. In this age, there is no alternative for spiritual progress. Using spiritual scripture and logic, Mahaprabhu forcefully yet politely convinced the Mayavadis of Vaishnavism on an intellectual basis. There was little debate. Upon hearing the wonderfully disarming explanations of Lord Chaitanya, the hearts of the Mayavadis began to change. So moved were all who listened that only Prakashananda himself had the power to speak. My dear Lord, your direct explanation of Vedanta is certainly enlivening and wonderful. You are the supreme person of Godhead, and thus you are all knowing and have inconceivable energies. At this point, Prakashananda and all his followers, numbering in the tens of thousands, Lord joined Lord Chaitanya in an elaborate kirtana, enthusiastically chanting and dancing throughout the streets of Banaras. The name of Krishna resounded with unabashed glory as Lord Chaitanya led the procession all over the holy city, now made even more holy by the Sankirtana movement. When Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu passed by the people, Lord Krishnanath Kavilas wrote, he would raise his arm and say, please chant Hare Krishna, please chant Krishna, please chant Hari. All the people received him by chanting Hare Krishna and they offered him their sincerest respects by chanting with great enthusiasm.
अभी हाँ 1 मिनट जल्दी से हाथ धो लो इसको भोग लगा नहीं लगा तो कर दीजिए वो मैं लगा वो लगाऊं जी हाँ वो लगाऊं नहीं आपको आप उनसे मैं बात से लगा दूंगा संसार दावानललितलोका त्रनाय कारुण्य घनाघनन्दं प्राप्तस्य कल्याण गुणार्णवस्य वन्दे गुरु श्रीचरणरविन्दं महाप्रभु कीर्तन नृत्य गीता पवित्रमाधन्मनसोरसेना रोमाञ्चकम्पासुतरङ्गभाजो वन्दे गुरु श्रीचरणरविन्दम् श्रीविग्रहाराधन नित्यनाना शृङ्गारतं मन्दिरनाथनाथो तस्य भक्तांश्च निन्दतोऽपि वन्दे गुरु श्रीचरणरविन्दम् चतुर्विधासि भगवत्प्रसाद साधन तृप्तान् हरिभक्तसङ्घान् कृत्वैव तृप्तिं भजत सदैव वन्दे गुरु श्रीचरणरविन्दं श्रीराधिका माधवयोरपार माधुर्य लीला गुण रूप नाम प्रतीक्षणास्वादन लोलुपस्य वन्दे गुरु श्री चरणरविन्दं मुकुन्दयो नो रतिकेलिसिद्धे यया लिभिर्युक्तिरपेक्षणीया तत्रादिदक्षात्मतिवल्लभस्य वन्दे गुरु श्री चरणरविन्दं साक्षाद्धरितेन समस्तशास्त्रे उक्तस्तथा भावयतैव सद्भिः किन्तु प्रभोर्य प्रियैव तस्य वन्दे गुरु श्री चरणरविन्दं यस्य प्रसादात् भगवत्प्रसादो यस्य प्रसादान्न गति कुतोऽपि ध्यायन्स्तुवंस्तस्य यशस्त्रिसन्ध्यं वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दं वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दं नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिनिति नामिने नमस्ते सारस्वती देवे गौरवानुप्रचारिणे निर्विशेषशून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे नमस्ते नरसिंहाय प्रह्लादलाददायिने हिरण्यकशिपूर्वक्षः शिलाटङ्कनखालये इतो नरसिंह परतो नरसिंह यतो यतो यामि ततो नरसिंह बाहिर्नरसिंह हृदये नरसिंह नरसिंहमदिं शरणं प्रपदे तव करकमलबरे नाकम् अद्भुतसिंहं दलिता हिरण्यकशिपुतनुभृङ्गं केशवघृता नरहरिरूप जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय नरसिंहदेव 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 जय नरसिंहदेव जय प्रहलाद महाराज प्रहलाद महाराज प्रहलाद महाराज जय प्रहलाद महाराज जय सर्वभक्ति विनाशक श्री नरसिंहदेव भगवान की जय भक्त शिरोमणि प्रहलाद महाराज की जय वृंदाय तुलसी देव्ये प्रियाय केशवस्य च कृष्ण भक्ति प्रदे देवी सत्वतै नमो नमः वृंदाय तुलसी देव्ये प्रियाय केशवस्य च कृष्ण भक्ति प्रदे देवी सत्वतै नमो वृंदाय तुलसी देव्ये प्रियाय केशवस्य च कृष्ण भक्ति प्रदे देवी सत्वतै नमो नमः नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः राधा कृष्णा सेवा पावो यही अभिलाषी जे तुम्हार शरण लय तार वांछा पूर्ण है कृपा करी कर तारे वृंदावनवासी मोरा अभिलाष विलास कुंज दियो नयने हरि बोल सदा युगल रूपराशि निवेदन धरो सखीरानुगत करो सेवाधिकार दिए करो निज दासी दिन कृष्ण दासे कहे नमो राहाय श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेमे नमो नमः। यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्मत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिण पदे पदे। यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्मत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिण पदे पदे। यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्मत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिण पदे पदे। कृष्ण भक्ति प्रदायिनी विंध्य देवी तुलसी महारानी की जय। वृंदाए तुलसी देव्ये प्रियाय केशवस्य च कृष्ण भक्ति पदे देवी सतोते नमो नमः। वृंदाए तुलसी देव्ये प्रियाय केशवस्य च कृष्ण भक्ति पदे देवी सतवते नमो नमः। वृंदाए तुलसी देव्ये प्रियाय केशवस्य च कृष्ण भक्ति पदे देवी सतवते नमो नमः। हरे कृष्ण हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे राम हरे राम 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 चल स्टार्ट करते हैं। हो गया ना, ये तो ड्राई फ्रूट है ना। ये सब तो बाद में, इसमें तो स्पेशल नवदीप धाम की जय, श्री गौर निताय की जय, अंतरदीप जय, मायापुर धाम की जय, गंगा माँ यमुना माई की जय, तुलसी देवी भक्ति देवी की जय, हरिनाम संकीर्तन की जय, गौर पूर्णिमा आगमी महामहोत्सव की जय, निताय गौर हरि प्रेमानंदे, हरि हरि बोल।